Listeners, welcome to yet another episode of Courage Talks. Special guest today is Jairam Varadaraj, the Managing Director of LG Equipments, a major senior veteran in the industry, especially here in Tamil Nadu. He's had exemplary roles in the industry and he's taken the LG brand globally to soaring heights. Welcome, Jairam.
Thank you, Hitel. Glad to be here. And thanks for your very generous introduction. Great to be with you.
So, Jairam, as you know, the topic is Courage Talks, and the story behind the podcast is my book, Against All Odds, which is my father's story about his stories of courage in his daily life. I wanted to ask you, what does courage mean to you? Any role model for courage that you have had in your life?
I think it's tempting to say courage is the opposite of fear, but for me, in my experience, fear is a very good partner for courage. And for me, the essence of courage is the willingness to fail. And if you have fear as a companion, it always ensures that you're diligent about whatever you attempt to do with courage. So, combination of the willingness to fail with fear being a constant companion provides the right kind of a balance to go out and try things, fail, okay, get up and redo it again. I think that for me is the meaning of courage. Sometimes it's not absence of fear, because absence of fear can be a horrible thing. My role model has been my grandfather, because he started with literally nothing. And throughout his life, he went into so many things. It is just amazing. He ran a bus company. He had 2 airline companies. He produced 2 movies. He went into mineral mining. He did gold mining. It's just a wide spectrum of stuff that he went and did. And he had absolutely no problem with saying, okay, if I lose it, that's fine. I'll come back and retry it. That, for me, it takes a lot to go from nothing to build a lot and then be able to stake it.
That's very interesting. Talking about your grandfather, any incident, any quote from him, anything that you remember about him one-on-one, which kind of
I
stays
don't
with
remember. I was too young to remember what he said.
Okay.
But there were things about him which stand out. For instance, he bought the entire scrap of a British battalion. Field telephones, it had armored vehicles broken down, all kinds of stuff. And he used to take us the weekend and to that scrapyard and say, build something out of it. Use your imagination and build something out of it. And we were allowed to do whatever we want. You have to work with your hands. It's not about getting somebody else to do it. So, that thing of saying, go ahead and do something, try it, see what happens. I don't remember what he said, but that was the experience.
Do you remember what you built?
I was the youngest, so I built, he had an 8-acre campus, and it was chaotic with vehicles going everywhere. So I made and painted traffic signs for and my eldest cousin actually built a tractor.
That's awesome. That's very impressive. Is the tractor lying somewhere around in the house?
No.
Related to courage, I've had a few guests on the episode and they've been humble enough and kind enough. Whenever I ask them about stories of courage, they say, oh, I had a very privileged background and I don't have any stories of courage, and which kind of puts me a little bit in an awkward situation. I wanted to ask that question directly to you, Jairam. Does privilege prevent courage from prospering? Or do you think that's just an excuse?
I don't think so. You have very poor people who are very courageous. You have very privileged people who live in extreme fear. So I don't think it's your starting point. I think it's the question of being constantly curious about some things and wanting to do something which pushes you out of what your comfort is, your familiarity is. I don't think that the starting point of that is either poverty or privilege. It's more an internal thing. How it builds in a person, why it builds, it's difficult. I'm sure there's a lot of research that's been written on it, but I don't know what it is.
So what you're trying to say is that the genes have a big role to play, regardless of the environment in which the individual is brought up.
I'm not even sure it's genes. I think it's how you're brought up. And in your growing journey, you experience, you meet people and you latch on to certain things. Why you latch on to certain things is very difficult to say, but certain things kind of are powerful in your life experience. You latch on to them. And multiple such things come together as some sort of, they take a life of their own. They become a force inside
Yeah.
that makes you want to do certain things differently.
Right. Being a third generation entrepreneur from the LRG Naidu family, family's value and ethics have probably been a seeding ground for what you've achieved. Would you want to take us back in terms of what are the elements that you picked up from the legacy and what has stayed with you, what has
Mhm.
stood out as your own personality today?
I think two things that stand out is to give back in abundance, not just in to assuage your guilt of having made wealth. So it started with what my grandfather did in 1942. He came from a village where there was no school, so he was not educated. 1918 is when he started his business. In 1942, he built a school with a hostel in his village. I mean, that's a massive school that still runs now.
And we're talking
And
pre-independent
his
with its own
Yes, it was pre-independence. It was not that. And for him, it was all free. There's no charges. And if there were charges, it was so minuscule. It was funded by him. And that is one example, but similar to that, he funded a school for women in Tirupur. So there's always been a certain substantial giving, not just marginal stuff. So that's been part of it. That's flowed through generations. So now in LG, we give 4% of our PBT for social cause. The law says it's 2% of PAT, but we've been doing 4% of PBT for the last 25 years. So that's one thing that we don't even consider it as something great that we are doing. It is something we say, this is why we exist for. There's no need to highlight it and show it off. It's part of why you exist. The other part of it is frugal innovation. I think it's also because of the context of India at that time, my own family's context. So there was a need to do get into businesses, get into manufacturing, because both the bus service and the airline was getting nationalized. They were getting into manufacturing. The typical model in India was to get license from European, American companies and then set up production here, which is the model that the companies that were curated by my dad and my uncle were following the same model. But unlike a lot of other business families, our capital in the family was not as high as the hunger to do business.
Yeah.
So as a consequence, there was built a very this strong practice of frugal innovation.
Right.
So how do you use your own native ingenuity, good engineers in India, and challenge them and challenge the company to build things that would have cost 10x if you had imported from Europe or America. So, to give you an example, even in LG, one of the critical machine tools is where the rotors are made. It's a milling from grinding machine.
Mhm.
It costs a couple of million euro if you have to import it. We can afford it now. We can import it. But we felt about 15 years ago, this can be made, designed and made very well. It's not about diluting the standards of the machine. It is about
That's
making
important.
a machine at the minimum as good, but ideally far better. So over the last 7, 8 years, we built a series of machines, and those machines cost 1/10 of what we would have otherwise paid. That's something that we are constantly looking to do. It's part of the whole DNA in the company.
Couple of follow-up questions are coming out. The first one is with regard to the charity element that you mentioned about.
Yeah.
A lot of times, large organizations are criticized for starting with charity way too late in their journey. They're like, okay, when I'm completely satisfied, when I'm kind of exhausted with all my strategic
Yeah.
goals and
Yeah.
ambition, that's when I will focus on charity. When did it start for you and what prompted the decision?
I think it started right from the beginning when my grandfather started. So it
Okay.
was not like till we built something. The minute he started getting even a little bit of surplus, I think there was always a giving. And that just kept growing.
As the company grew up, of course, the element of the
Yeah.
challenge. You've taken LG through number of strategic growth initiatives, including divesting from the non-core products. Any large, courageous decision or any bold decision which kind of stays with you throughout the years in terms of something which was quite far bigger and more landmark than the others which you might have taken? Anything that you'd like to narrate and talk about? And maybe the backstory around that would be more interesting to know. A lot of people might
Yeah.
obviously be benefiting from that decision that you took, but how did it all arrive at would be interesting.
Yeah, two things that stand out in that journey of cleaning up our portfolio. We decided in 92, that's when India was opening up. The best of the world was going to come into India, and all the companies in India were outdated technology. So we were sitting on 8 different businesses, and we knew that it was certain death if we continued down this path. So we had to be an inch wide, mile deep, rather than a mile wide and an inch deep, which is what we were at that time. So we decided to clean up our portfolio. So two things that we did. One was we were making brake systems for trucks, and our customer was Tata Motors. That was contributing close to 25% of our revenue. And we had just recently invested close to, at that time, there was a significant amount of money of 4 crores in a line just dedicated for those products. Now, we were a second supplier to Tata Motors, and they encouraged us because they wanted a second source. But the pricing that they wanted was very, very low. But
Data.
yeah, and they said, okay, we'll give you 3,000 sets a month, which was pretty significant revenue for us. So I agreed. I said, yes, we will do it at this price. We'll take it up as a challenge. But if the volumes go down, please compensate us, because we can't sustain at these prices because we make promises to our vendors. So they said, of course, that will be taken care of. But then 3,000 dropped to about 400.
Oh, man.
And when we went to Tata Motors, they said, but this is automotive. It doesn't work like this. There will be ups and downs. And tomorrow it could become 3,400. I can't come and ask for price reduction from you. So that's when I realized that if you really want to grow a business, you need to be connected to the end customer. Any business, at least in my mindset, I didn't want to be an intermediary supplier. I wanted to be the final supplier. Based on this, and I said, I don't want to deal with OEMs that can really change the course and change your fate. So I went to the board and I said, I want to divest this business or shut it down. I think they thought that this was being crazy because we just invested a lot of money. So we finally divested that business. And I think it was a very good decision because it gave us stability rather than relying on the vagaries of the OE's business and cycles. That was something that was tough, and we took that decision. The second one was we used to make pasteurizers and bottle washers for making beer. We were the only company in the country making it. We had maybe 85, 90% share of the market, and maybe 10% was getting imported. Basically, two major breweries at that time. It was United Breweries and Chauvelus. And the rest of them were all supplying into these guys. And both of them were loyal customers of ours. And the profit margin on each equipment sale was about 25, 30 lakhs. And the profit margin was around 40%. Not a big top line, but very healthy bottom line. And the cost of doing that business was also low because very few customers that you had to sell to. But the writing was clearly on the wall that it is not going to be UB and Chauvelus. The world's biggest breweries are going to enter India. And when they do, they're going to bring their vendors along with them. And the whole equation is going to change. And we don't have the technology to compete with the latest. So again, I went to the board and I said, I'm going to shut this business down because I can't sustain it, because the cost of getting the latest technology and the difficulty to convince Carlsberg or a Heineken or a Foster's or a Stroh's that we are a good equipment manufacturer, whereas they will bring their equipment suppliers from all over the world that they're used to. So I said, it's just not going to happen. So again, fortunately, the board kind of let me do and they trusted me. I shut that business down. So that was a very tough few years that we had to absorb the shocks of all that.
Your negotiation with Tata reminds me of one of my instances in sales in Japan when The Japanese customer had a 50-member team, and then they came back and said, "Hey, we want to increase the team by 10, but we want you to reduce the man-month cost." So the
Sorry.
customer had a 50-member team, and then they came back and said, "We want to increase the team by 10 people, but we want to reduce the man-month price because we're giving you more business." And I went
Yeah.
to my India manager and I said, "Look, this needs your approval." He said, "I'm fine, but tomorrow if they reduce the team, will they increase the man-month price as well?" And obviously that was an answer
Yeah.
no, and the Japanese was happy to continue the same man-month charge.
Yeah.
But
So
3,000 to 400 is
OEMs are tough.
definitely.
OEMs are tough.
The other element of LG which stands out is your insistence on world-class quality. And obviously, when you build something world-class, you obviously want to sell to the world. And I've had multiple mentorship engagements with Indian startups, and a lot of them obviously start with the local market as their target. And the discouragement or disillusionment to not go global is because, hey, the market for India is so big. Why you want to waste time going abroad and trying to sell to foreign customers? And obviously, excitement about going abroad is because you get more bang for the buck for the same service or the product. You're going to get much more in a foreign market anywhere. Even if you sell to Singapore, you'll get far more. Forget about the
Mm.
US. But the challenge, of course, is with regard to the level of quality standard, which are much higher in the Western world. How did you address this problem when you were conceptualizing or strategizing more like a world class product?
So our context was a little different. In India, which was our mother market, where we were 95, almost 98% of our revenue was coming from India, our competitors were the world's number one and number two. We had to compete with them in India. So there was no question of making a product which was just sufficient for India. So that was point number one. Point number two was when we decided to focus on the compressor business in all the portfolio. Even to compete and stay relevant in India, we had to really up our game because that number one and number two now was unshackled from all the import restrictions. They could bring in the best technology in their network into India. So we had to up our game. Now, the cost of upping our game, both technology, manufacturing systems, quality, the cost of doing it, the Indian market did not justify it because the Indian market is only about 3 or 4, 5% of the global market. We, even to stay relevant in India, we had to be global. So that's point number one. Point number two is we are an unknown brand with a made in India label outside the country. Now, a factory manager could lose his job if he decided to buy an LG machine and it failed. Because if a competitor, world leader, let's say Atlas Copco, he bought an Atlas Copco machine, it failed, they would have been forgiven. And say, yeah, it happens, it's all right. Whereas LG would have said, no, you shouldn't have bought it. It's made in India. Why did you buy it? For us, the standard of quality was not as good as the others. It had to be far, far ahead of the others.
Yeah.
And that was the quest. And that's the benchmark we continue to pursue and say, you got to be far ahead of the others.
Well, that's very relevant. It holds true as well. I think that's something which we still face challenge. I remember my dad was in textile export, and the level of
Yeah.
QC which they had to go through for their products to pass the test
Yeah.
of a US retailer used to be far higher than their Chinese competitors for
Absolutely.
whatever reason it might
Sure.
be. I hope that this changes sooner rather than later because we are pretty good at producing quality products as well. In your
Yeah.
leadership talks, you have emphasized on chasing the North Star and staying true
Mhm.
to your long-term vision and goal. What has been the benchmark long-term vision which has kind of carried the organization through? And how does it align with your own personal North Star?
When we decided that we want to be in the top three in the global air compressor business, you come to that decision or that aspiration after thinking through the dominant logic of that aspiration. That dominant logic is very weak. Then what happens is you start wavering in your journey. So what's the dominant logic? Is the opportunity large enough for you to have a reasonable share and still be a large player? Second, is the opportunity profitable enough for you to be able to sustain and grow? Because at the end of the day, you're committing capital that belongs to others. There has to be reasonable return. You need to really kick the tires hard on that one and make sure that that logic is solid. It is just not fashionable to say, I want to be a global company in this business and you have really not gone into the logic of it. Now, once that is strongly embedded, that logic, that becomes the touchstone that you go and touch periodically every time you have a doubt whether your aspiration, or should I continue to pursue it, or should I drop it and look at other India centric businesses. So you go and touch it and say, yeah, it is large, it is real, and it is profitable. That's really the focus. And for me personally, I would rather be an inch wide and a mile deep. I don't like to be a mile wide, an inch deep, because as a customer of products, personally, I would like to buy a product from a supplier who knows the depth of the product so that my experience with the product is very high. I bring that same thing here and say, no, let's not try to be in 10 different businesses.
That sounds similar to core competency, Mr. C.K. Prahlad, and that takes me to your PhD days in the
Yeah.
US. Any interesting conversation, any memory that you have from Mr. Prahlad that you would like to cite? Or
So CK was in my thesis committee. I started my thesis in 86 and I finished in 87, or 85, finished in 87. And at that time, India was a very closed market. Yeah, it was closed. It was all protected. There's really no point in talking about Indian companies being globally competitive. What's the point? It's not relevant. So when I went, my thesis was to ask the question, why aren't Indian companies competitive worldwide? And so I went to CK and I said, this is really what I want to find answers for. He looked at me and he says, you think you're wasting your time doing this because this is the context? I mean, the context is all wrong. I said, maybe, but I still want to go and find out. He said,
yeah,
okay, go do it. So that was a journey that started, and then India opened up, and then CK started coming to India very regularly, and he created, not by deliberate intent, but by the press, the Windsor Club. The Windsor Club, we used to meet about 30, 35 of us. We used to meet in Windsor Manor in Bangalore. Once a year, it was a 3-day session where CK came and led a conversation about saying, how do you build Indian multinationals? We were called the Windsor Club to contrast with the Bombay Club. The Bombay Club was a group of industrialists who were looking for protection. And we were a bunch of people saying, bring them on, we will compete and build. So the likes of Azim Premji, Shiv Nadar, Adi Godrej, Harsh Mariwala, Sajan Jindal, all of us used to be, Venu Srinivasan, Gopal, all of us used to be part of this Windsor Club and say, how do you build this multinational from out of India? So that's really the journey that he fostered. For me, it fostered even during my PhD days. And then his presence with us every year kind of cemented it further.
the Bombay Club versus Windsor Club remind me of the Mumbai versus Delhi rivalry in cricket back in those days.
yeah. Yeah.
Obviously a completely different context, but Mumbai
Yeah.
versus Delhi still stands out. And,
Yeah.
and of course, you had a good exposure, and I think your exposure as a student was your bulk of your exposure to the US. Any of the lasting memories that you have of your stint in the US which helped you shape LG today? I mean, did you look up or benchmark yourself against a US corporation, maybe in another business, and you said, okay, this is the kind of principle that you want to follow, or this is the kind of goals that you want to set based on the success of that organization?
I don't think I looked at companies specifically, Hetal. It was,
Okay.
I went to study in the 80s, right? And 80s, India was considered third world. And we had students from all over the world, right? So there were, forget the Europeans who were considered the first world, but there were students from Japan, there were students from Korea, from not so much from China, but from Taiwan. These countries and Malaysia, Singapore, these were all the emerging kind of a thing.
Right.
And it used to bother me that they and their countries got a lot more respect. We were kind of saying, okay, India, okay, fine. Taj Mahal. That's it. Nothing of substance in the.
Elephants, snake charmers.
Yeah, exactly. Elephants and time. So it bothered the hell out of me. And then I said the root cause of it is because of our economic power.
Yeah.
If we had economic power, then the respect changes. I mean, of course, you use the economic power very judiciously in the right way. So I said the engine is to build that. And I said, okay, the government has its job to do. How can individual enterprises change that narrative, right? And pursue something that will significantly alter. So at a microcosm, they contribute. And if 1 million organizations at a microcosm level contribute to the same philosophy, then the nation changes.
That's a very interesting point. An important
Yeah,
element for a leader, of course, beyond everything, is to be able to create that next line of leadership. And mentoring plays a big
yeah,
role. I mean, apart from your own kids and
yeah,
your direct reports, who
hmm
obviously you are monitoring on a regular
yeah.
basis. How has mentoring been an important element in growing leadership in LG? And if you want to cite any examples in terms of how mentoring has changed
Mm.
some individuals in your organization.
I would say that's one of the biggest, toughest things that I'm learning now. So, when you run the business with your sleeves rolled up, you really don't think about succession, mentoring, and all that. You just build a team and say, guys, let's go out and make it happen. And then suddenly you realize, hey, wait a minute, there is an expiry date to all this. We need to look at building the next. So it brings, again, it's a process. You can't do it with fiats and saying there is a process. You execute that process, you fail a few times, you correct it, and eventually it will reach a certain stable, good situation. So that's where we are. So one of the things, the underlying foundation is in the mentoring process is that one thing that is not compromised, that should not be compromised, is the purpose and the value. That you don't give an opportunity to discuss, it becomes a platform of conversation to adopt. It is not about saying, can we dilute it here? Can we compromise it here? No, that's a given. I mean, you don't do anything. So that in your mind, when you're running it, that is a given. But it's not so for a lot of people who are brought in as a team members, who have a different kind of a context from their earlier companies. So a lot of time has to be spent saying the purpose and values in our company are very, very serious. It's not wallpaper and posters that sometimes how it is practiced in other companies. We take it seriously. We ask ourselves questions every time decisions are made, whether this is the right thing from a purpose point of view. That mentoring is one that you need to look for opportunities constantly to reinforce that, right? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is letting go. There is a certain style that you brought to play that took the company from where it was to what it is now. That's not necessarily the style that is right for the company to go to the next level. Letting that go is a very difficult thing because your definition of how things work is very strongly ingrained in you.
Yeah.
And to say, no, 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 there is another way in which it will work even better, the agility and the elasticity in the mind for that is a little weak. That's something that you need to learn, build a muscle around it. More than the muscle, you have to build a heart to be resilient and say, okay, let it fail. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that
Yeah.
you mentioned letting go because yesterday only we were discussing for a potential curriculum for family business entrepreneurs, and we talked about conflict and scenarios of conflict. And one point that I brought up was exactly that, right?
Yeah.
Because in my mentoring with budding entrepreneurs as well, I spend far more time telling them what not to do than what to do,
Exactly.
right? Because as an
Exactly.
entrepreneur, you already have 10 things in your mind. You know what you need to do, but the problem is you don't know what to let go and what to give
Exactly.
up as well. The
Exactly.
slogan which I cite a lot, which supports the let go theory, is don't put good money behind bad.
Yeah,
You already have
good.
had spent your blood, sweat, and tears behind something. It's
Yeah,
not worked. Why do you want to put more,
yeah,
initiative or money around
absolutely.
that? That
Yeah,
definitely won't work. Of course, your initiative around mentoring and support is not restricted to LG. You partnered with Academy as well, and the
yeah,
interesting example of Digital Dojo with PSG Krishnamal College, where you're supporting potential women
yeah.
students to become women entrepreneurs
Mm.
tomorrow. How strong is your belief about women entrepreneurship as an initiative? And what is your take on the limitations which women are facing in the industry today? And of course, if you want to cite any examples where people have actually
Yeah.
proved that wrong, would be lovely to know that.
I don't think there is any limitation. There could be some self-limiting beliefs, right?
Mhm.
And women who have gone past those self-limiting beliefs have done as good, if not better, than men in many fields. So I don't think there is any limitation. Now, the starting point in our society is that women have to play the secondary role, a slightly softer role, a subservient role. That's the kind of the narrative that is generally prevalent in society. I think the biggest thing is for people to break away from that narrative. Women should break away from that narrative early on, not even let it be even an iota of presence in or a possibility. So I think if they are able to get past that narrative, I don't see any limitation or any difference. And I think women bring a certain innate capability of patience, which is not there among men. And a combination of softness and patience
Hmm.
brings a certain resilience to a business. And I think they will only do far better. So that narrative has to go out. And
Hmm.
then I think sky's the limit. As
Correct.
far as LG's contribution, I think it's not so much to put a metric and say so many women entrepreneurs should come out of the dojo. That's
Mhm.
not really the intent. But the intent is to say, can we learn from academics a perspective in our own business? And can the students learn a perspective of business even while they're learning? And a confluence of this could either result in an entrepreneurial journey or a very strong professional journey in our company or in some other company.
And the moment you mentioned about self-limiting beliefs, I remember two
Yeah,
examples. One is the famous quote from Margaret Thatcher. She had mentioned that if I want to get something said, I ask a man to do it. If I want to get something done, I ask a woman to do it. And there is this interesting
yeah,
anecdote which Sheryl Sandberg had shared in a book, Lean,
yeah,
where she talked about this conference where she was talking, and obviously being a popular speaker, there were a lot of questions, and time was running
yeah,
out, and she strongly advocated that, and there were a lot of hands raised in the audience, and
yeah,
she said no more questions, and all the women quietly put their hands down, but a few men insisted on keeping their hands up and making sure they were heard.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think the self-limiting belief can be addressed by the environment which the organization provides.
Absolutely,
Anything that LG has
absolutely.
done which has helped the women in LG to get out of that shackles?
So we've been trying a lot of on multiple vectors to bring diversity into our company. And surprisingly, we've been successful in bringing diversity on the shop floor to a higher percentage than in the office and in leadership. So one is very few women want to be mechanical engineers. I mean, generally speaking, very few students want to be mechanical engineers.
Ask
And
my
in that,
mechanical engineer classmate. They used to do, right, 4 years of mechanical engineering, one girl or two.
yeah, yeah. So, that's a starting challenge, right?
Yeah.
So we need to figure it out. We still haven't figured out what's the formula for that. Leadership, we are actively saying that certain roles we should only hire women. But, again, getting people to come and join a company called LG, which is not yet known in the job market, is tough. It's not something that's going to happen. A move of our corporate office to Bangalore, these are all steps in that direction to be able to attract diversity in talent. So these are significant, bold moves. And I'm hoping that these will pay dividends eventually.
You mentioned about the shop floor, and I remember that informal discussion that we had at your house, and you mentioned about some interesting policies like no attendance, the synergy between the pay scales. You want to highlight some of these initiatives and how they've been instrumental in getting to make LG where it is today?
So, employees are a critical stakeholder, and one of our values is trust your stakeholder. So, the way we practice our purpose is called conscience in action. Now, if you want to be practicing conscience in action towards an employee and you say you values trust, you need to convert many of your policies that are not based on trust, right? For instance, attendance implies that I don't trust an employee. Approval for leave means I don't trust an employee. So we said, let's be bold and get rid of all these and trust employees. So that's something that we do. So you don't need to apply for leave. You don't need to punch a clock. You want to travel on business. You don't need approval. You just be judicious about it. So things like that. We have a long way to go in terms of, because we came in from the British regime. British didn't trust the Indians. So it was all the rules were written on the basis that you're guilty until proven innocent. But we have continued down that same path even after the British left. So we need to consciously go and change it to say you are innocent until proven guilty, right? So we trust you. So that's really what we are trying to do as part of our policy, building that policy out.
Yeah.
So that's an example of, how we are dealing with it. Yeah.
I think trust is very important. I think that's
Yeah.
actually core to my PhD
Yeah.
research as well. And I
Yeah.
realized that it is unfortunate that trust is not a given, and someone needs to work hard to get your trust, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
we do all kind of background reference checks. We ask
Yeah.
them to give
Yeah.
recommendations
Yeah.
before we hire the
Yeah.
employee. Like look in his or her eye and
Yeah.
decide whether you want to trust.
Yeah.
If you don't trust him as a person, any amount of background checks is not going to give you that sense of
Yeah.
satisfaction.
Yeah.
It
Right.
just might just be a kind of an insurance policy that okay, if something goes wrong, you have someone
Sure.
to catch
Sure.
hold of.
Sure.
But
Sure.
you will never be able to win the trust, right? If you ask
Absolutely. No.
as well.
No.
I think another interesting element of LG, the way it's grown, is obviously partnership. And coming from having worked in organizations like Intel, Wipro, partnership has definitely been a core. How do you get your partners to align with your vision, considering the fact they might be from a completely different background? They might be having 10 other vendors to work with. Why would they want to comply and abide by your expectations if you're just one of the vendors and so on and so forth?
So one is again going back to our purpose. It's our suppliers are a critical stakeholder where we live out our purpose with them. And what that really means is again conscience in action with respect to vendors is, I mean, we are suppliers, we have customers, right? And we suffer from certain errant customers. They don't pay us on time. They do all kinds of problems. They reject when they shouldn't be rejecting, things like that, right? So we said, first, don't do that. Don't do those things. Then you have the right to demand the real performance from your vendors. So for instance, payment on time, it's almost a religion within our company, and somebody is going to lose a job if that doesn't happen. So you will not see vendors sitting outside our finance department following up on payment. Absolutely not. If it is on that day, it is paid on that day. It will come into their bank. So they don't have to do anything, right? So it was never like this. If you wind back 10, 15 years ago, there used to be a long list of people sitting in the finance department looking. And things like that, partnering with the vendors to see how can I improve your process so that I'm able to get it at a lower cost. It's not about my lower cost should come from your profit, but we want to preserve your profit, but at the same time lower our cost, and say, how can we bring our strength to play in a manner that is not threatening. So there are multiple such things that are done across the board.
So what you're saying is making LG more amenable as a partner goes in
Yeah,
a big way in making sure that the partners are able to see from a vision and
yeah,
expectation perspective as well.
yeah,
And it's very unfortunate. Like sometimes people judge your camaraderie based on such issues like payment on time.
yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's true. The other interesting element of LG is, of course, LG has been a great supporter for the Coimbatore Marathon. And a lot of times, not in Coimbatore, but pan India, a lot of times people give excuse as too much work or work pressure not to be able to spend time on health and fitness. LG as an organization has done both, right? You've obviously
Yeah,
created a very healthy workspace, and you've been
yeah.
letting your brand take the fore in events like Coimbatore Marathon. Have you seen an
Mhm,
increase in health and fitness levels in the employees because of the initiative, or it was
mhm.
always like that? You never was a concern.
I don't think we have measured it, Hetal, to come
Yeah.
back and say that, have we improved? But I think it's almost like a given. Somebody's healthy, they are active and they're participating and they should be healthy. So we have really not measured it. Yeah. It's not just physical health, we also pay a lot of attention to mental health. There are services that are offered which are extremely anonymous for people to dial in and speak to counselors expressing their concerns, pressures, whatever, so that, it's both physical and mental health.
Mental health initiative, was it proactive or reactive, if you don't mind sharing?
No, it was proactive because the minute it came as a consequence of COVID,
Oh, yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
In COVID, everyone was confused about everything. Some true north guidance had to be given to all employees to say, okay, everything will be fine. Just relax. There were a lot of concerns. What's going to happen? Am I going to lose a job? So bringing in lectures and town halls was one thing, but also really addressing them to get rid of your anxieties and stuff like that had to be done. So, and we said we'll just continue that because that's not just COVID related.
The other interesting element which I love about you is that you love reading books like me. So, any
Yeah.
favorite reads, any books that you recommended a lot, any topic, it could be, right? So,
Well, I used to be a voracious leader. Of late, that's kind of slipped into the thing. I'm hoping I'll pull it back from the hole and get back to getting into that cocoon that I used to feel whenever I met a book. The book that I really found very good is 21 Letters by Charles Handy. Very nicely written book. It's a small book, but
interesting.
very powerful book. Yeah,
I'll definitely check that out. It's not something which I've read, so it
yeah,
should be interesting to check.
yeah.
Any alternative career you had in your childhood which stays with you?
Well, I shocked my father once. I went and told him I want to be a fighter jet pilot, right? And this was in
Not
school
just a
and
commercial, a fighter jet.
fighter jet pilot,
Okay.
not a commercial. So I think he took me seriously. I think he got a little worried also. Probably that's why he put me on to flying lessons because those days as a student you got subsidized flying lessons from the government in the flying club.
How lucky you are.
So yeah, and I got my flying license earlier than I got my driver's license.
Wow.
so so I guess that was his way of saying, okay, just fly. There's no need for flying a jet.
Okay.
Just fly this. Yeah,
Stick to the simple one. Don't go with the advanced one.
yeah, yeah,
I think you had much better parents because being a pilot was my childhood dream, and I was like completely discouraged for inane reason. Like my eyesight was weak. I mean, like back in those days.
yeah,
Now I realize I'm
yeah,
sure there would have been more deeper meaning behind that.
yeah.
That's what stuck, and I never got a chance. But I think a couple of years back, I came to know someone had taken up flying lessons at the Bangalore Flying Club, and I was like, oh wow, I can actually go back and fulfill
Well,
that Chinese
you can
mind.
now. There are so many training institutes now.
I think the other interesting element, of course, is your art. So, is your distraction towards art one of the reasons why you stopped reading books, or
No, I don't think so. I think it is just art and books were running parallel at that time. So, no, not at all. Not at
yeah?
all. It just sometimes life gets, you get caught up on things and some of the fundamentals you lose.
Last question: anything amusing about you which people might not know?
Yes, so many things, but the most amusing thing was I sang in the college orchestra. Yeah.
Wow.
And I played and I played the drums for the college orchestra. And the song that I sang was, I don't know whether you remember, it was a song that when Muhammad Ali went against George Foreman, it was called Inzire. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Inzire. So that was a song. I forget the name of the band that sang it. So
Wow.
that was a song. So
You still have a drum set at home?
that was a short-lived career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It started and
Yeah.
ended with that song.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But you have a drum set at home? Have you
I
touched drum?
did, and then I donated it to to the school.
Ah, okay.
So
Did you pass
yeah,
on the artistic touch to your kids as well?
I don't know. My daughter is an artist. I'd
Hmm.
like to think it came from me, but then you know. Yeah.
Okay, the last question. What is the question that you have for me?
So what drives you to keep exploring courage?
I think that's a good question. So I believe that human potential is infinite. I believe that it should remain infinite because the day human potential is identified
Mm,
as finite, growth will stop, right? I mean, if I take the example of Ironman, which is a triathlon which I do,
yeah.
people feel impressed that I do an Ironman. I look at people who've done 40 Ironmans. I look at people who have done a cold Ironman. I don't know what's the word, but they've done an Ironman in Antarctica, right? So the swim
Oh
cycle run
gosh.
actually
Yeah.
happens on ice and ice cold water. And when we talk about space exploration, we were from the generation when man had landed on the moon. Now you
Yeah.
have people talking about going to Mars and all, right? I think regardless of whatever people might think about Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, I think initiatives like those are important to ensure that your
Yeah.
North Star is out of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
when your North
Correct.
Sky is out of the galaxy, then sky is not the limit. Okay, the galaxy is the
Yeah.
limit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's what keep me going. I believe that I would not want to sit idle. If I sit idle, then I think my days are numbered. But if I keep motivating myself with some goal or the other, I'll stay excited. I will be using my brain cells and I'll be using my muscles all the time.
Well, it's amazing what you've done, Hital, in terms of, I know when I tell you about your Ironman, you talk about the others who have done 40 more. But the point is, the people who do this level of competition are exceptionally special. It's not the physical part, it's the mental part. And
All
I
the way.
think
All
the
the way.
mental toughness is what I look up to, I'm envious about. Yeah.
Thank
So,
you very much for your kind words, sir. And thank you very
yeah.
much. It was a wonderful discussion, and I know this was
Thank
long
you,
pending.
Hital. It's great talking to you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.